Howdy YouTube, eznix here with a video for you. I'm sitting in front of my Debian based eznixOS 103 installed, and we're going to do a video on constructing my build. I haven't done one of these instructional videos in a while. I believe the last one, the full one, was done on Debian Stretch, so it's been over a year. Figured it was about time. I know I've done update videos whenever I've released an updated version, but I haven't done a build video really. So that's what this is. You're looking at my home folder here, and in my home folder I have a build script and a preparation directory, what I call, with all my build files. Now we're going to get started running the script, and while it's running I'll go over it. So what I've done is opened up a terminal. I SU'd with the L switch for a login, true login, root login, and what that does is it gives me the proper path statement. In Debian Buster, SU, the behavior of SU changed, and if you just use SU on its own, you don't get root's path, and you need root's proper path statement to operate basically the live build script. Specifically, the deb bootstrap command will not work because deb bootstrap is in sbin, and sbin is not a folder in your standard login. So that's why I use the su-l command. And when you do that, you're dumped into root's home directory. You have to be aware of that. So I had to cd back into my home directory where the script lies. So let's go ahead and run our script. The name of the script is BLD eznix 103. It's a bash script, so we're going to do bash BLD eznix 103, and we'll let it run. And you can see the first thing it did was set the live build config parameters and then starts the script. So while that's running, this is going to take, on my system, 4-core processor with 16 gigs of memory running at 3.2 gigahertz. It's going to take about 45 minutes, a little under an hour, maybe 50 minutes. So that's why I wanted to get that started. So we'll minimize that. I don't want to interfere with the actual folder that's being used during the script. So I brought up a copy of it. So we're free now to look around. Now this is inside the eznix 103 folder. All of my build files are here. A copy of the script, documentation, and all the bits that go into my build that I've customized myself. Whatever backgrounds I want placed in the build are in the background folder. The bootloaders folder contains copies of files that come with live build. If we go into, let's do this. If we go into USR share and look for the live folder, there it is. There's a build folder, and then a whole bunch of files that live build uses. In bootloaders is all of the bootloader files. Now the ISO Linux folder contains the bootloaders used for the live ISO. You have a default splash screen with which I replace with my own. The rest of these files I don't touch. I leave them alone. So if we go back to we go back to here, that's what's in bootloaders. So all these files get copied into my live build. I do have the files necessary to set up the Calamares installer. I personally don't use it. I don't include it by default as an installer. However, I realize it's popular, people like it. I keep it in the build folder just so that if you're using my files to recreate your own system, you can go ahead and include the Calamares installer. All the branding is here that make it look like my own. Now, if you're doing this for yourself, you'll want to replace the welcome screen, the slide, the logo. You're going to want to replace the text in the description here, the branding description, with your own, of course. My documentation is all here. And you know what? Let's go through some of these files, because these documentation files mirror the exact steps for the build process, at least the build eznix 103 how-to. So let's open that up and we can take a look. So the first thing is deciding on the name of the build folder and the location of the build files. And then we get into the actual meat of the script here. First thing I do is set a working directory variable to the current working directory. And then I make my build folder and cd into it. Next step is to set all the live build config options, and I'll go through some of these, if not all of them. The binary images specifies ISO hybrid, so my ISO can be written to a flash drive or a DVD. The mode is Debian. Now, supposedly live build does work in Ubuntu. I have not tested it. I have no desire to test it. But you can try if you'd like. If you do this in Ubuntu, specify the mode Ubuntu. But for me, it's Debian. The architecture is AMD 64, and for some reason that has to be repeated as a flavor. So that specifies 64-bit. The distribution I'm basing on is Buster. You can certainly place this to Stretch if you still wanted to build Stretch. You can make it testing. You can probably even use Bullseye if you wanted to. I don't know if you can do SID. I don't believe you can, but I could be wrong. The archive areas are the portions, the parts of the repositories you're pulling from. So I've set mine to main, contrib, and non-free. So my ISO will contain all the non-free files, the drivers, the firmware that Debian non-free images would have, plus more. I set the updates to true, so it's pulling from updates. Same with security. Cache, I'm not sure exactly what the cache setting does, but true seems to work. I can look it up in the manual, and I do include the manual. App recommends is set to true, so during the installation of packages, it will pull in everything that each package recommends. The installer, Debian installer, the live mode specifies to the installer that it install the system off the ISO. It's not going to allow you to select packages during the installation. It's going to transfer the squashfs file system in the ISO to your hard drive. And that's what I want, because I want the system as I constructed it installed. If I set this to normal, then the installer would run like a standard Debian installer, and you would get to choose exactly what you wanted to install, and you'd get a stock Debian installation, even though you're running my live system. The Debian installer GUI is set to true, so it includes not only the text mode installer, but the GUI mode installer. Now, these installers are available from the boot menu, not the live desktop. The Win32 loader is another setting that I'm not sure exactly what it does, but when I first learned live build, it was in all the examples, so I kept it. Everything seems to work, so I don't really question it. The ISO application is set to the name of my distro, or respin. The ISO preparer and publisher is set to my SourceForge site, and the volume name is set to eznixOS 103. And I just bumped the version numbers here as they would happen. Next part of the script is the software selection. First line, I include the task xfc desktop. Now what that package does, it's a meta package that pulls in the entire xfc desktop that Debian installs. Copies it into a file called desktop list chroot that's used by live build. These files are used by live build as lists to add software. Next line is a whole bunch of software, and this all gets piped into the packages list chroot file. And you can edit this list. You can make it shorter, you can make it longer. You can pull out individual packages. They're just package names. That's all they are. As if you were installing these at the command line, that's what you're listing here. New for this build, I decided to put Clonezilla in, and I decided to put Onico in. Now, Clonezilla is the console-based disk imaging suite. Very useful if you want to image hard drives or partitions. So I figured I'd put that in. Onico is a teeny little X program that makes a cat follow your mouse cursor. You can also make it a dog if you want. It's cute. It's been around for decades. I figured I'll stick it in, just in case someone wants. It's almost like an Easter egg. You have to discover that it's there. The next line here is some Broadcom Wi-Fi drivers that may or may not be needed, so they're optional. If you want to include them in your build, just uncomment the line. Now, the next line here is the first of 5 lines needed to uncomment if you want to include the Calamares installer in your build. So, and I instruct you right here, uncomment below line for Calamares installer. What this does just adds the Calamares installer packages to the build. Now, as I said, that's the first of 5 lines. The next of the lines to uncomment for Calamares is right here. This file creates the folder for the branding in your build. And then these 3 lines copy all of the settings and the branding into your build. So you have 5 separate lines to uncomment for Calamares installer. If you uncomment them all, run the script, your Calamares installer will be included in the build. Now, in between all those Calamari lines are the meat of copying my files into the build. So I have a bunch of commands here that just create directories. And they create directories in the config folder of the build folder. And inside the config includes chroot folder begins the root of what will be your file system. So you specify from this point where in the file system you're creating your folders. So you see a few: USR share, etc skill, USR share, USR local bin. So I'm creating all the folders I want in the places I need to put my files. And then these lines actually copy my files into the build, into these folders I created above. So that's how I get my bootloaders folder in. That's how I get my XFCE4 settings in. That's how I get my hooks, my live build hooks in. That's how I put my script in user bin local, the ezyadmin script. That's how I put my documentation in. I also include a full copy of my build folder in USR share. So that's there for you too. Put my one desktop icon on the desktop, so on and so forth. So after all this work is done, the last step of the script is issuing the live build command. And that's what I did. That's what this is doing right now, before, underneath. So all that's happening. We're already unpacking all the software we downloaded. So we're about a third of the way through this, depending on where in the packages we're at. This is probably the single longest point of the live build process is installing the software. For me, I include quite a bit. Now my ISO comes at close to 2 gigs, about 1.8, 1.9 gigs. I believe. Could be a little less, I'm not sure. But we'll see when it's done. So that is the live build script, and it's all explained right here. My ezyadmin script, this has changed. It's gotten a new feature in this release. I added an option to install the newest kernel from Backports. Now, I've always had Backports added at the optimize sources and update repos step. And here I actually use Backports. So, if we go down, you can see the steps necessary to install the latest new kernel from Backports. I'm installing the Linux image AMD64 and the headers, including the firmware, the non-free and the non-free miscellaneous, and then including all the firmware I added for Wi-Fi drivers. So when you install the latest kernel from Backports, you're getting pretty much a massive update of all the drivers and the kernel in the system. I haven't really played with this. I know it works. It does install what I want installed, and it does reboot and seem to function. In terms of updates, I'm not sure. I don't think the normal update command will update out of Backports. If you know, correct me. You may have to come back and run the ezyadmin script every so often to get the newest kernel from Backports, and that should just overwrite the current kernel, I believe. When you install the newest kernel from Backports, it doesn't replace the standard kernel, the 4.19 series, so you get a fallback in that sense, which is nice. You have two kernels. You have the 4.19 and whatever the latest is. Right now, it's the 5.4 series kernel, which is the newest LTS kernel from the Linux kernel devs. You also get all the other steps here, all the other functions that the eznixadmin menu tool provides. The eznixOS 103 bits how-to, I haven't used this in a while, but what this did is it collected most of the working documents and files from my build process and packages it up into a deb package that you can install. For a time, I used to build these deb packages whenever the documentation or the scripts changed and I didn't want to rebuild the whole ISO, and just made that available. I might do that again in the future, but I haven't really used this. But it's a nice example of how to create a simple deb package. I provide the GNU license copy here. The prepare how-to is really just basic steps, what to think about before you actually start your build. Come up with a name, come up with a folder structure, copy your backgrounds, copy your XFCE settings. It's really collecting everything you'll need to then start to build your project. And the README is simply the README I put up on my SourceForge download site to give a description of the project and the ISO, a little screenshot basically of the eznixadmin menu, and the credit. So that's all the README is. The hooks, these little live build hooks, I include to do two things. Remove some old crusty themes out of XFCE and remove Xsane because I don't need Xsane and simple scan. So that's all these hooks do. The hooks are just very simple scripts that get placed into the build, and you can see all this does is remove a few old themes. And same with this, it just removes the Xsane and Xsane common. HPLIP, the version of HPLIP that is in Buster is 3.18.12. So I give you the plugin just in case your printer, like my old printer, used to require this plugin for HPLIP to recognize and work with the printer. Icons, just have my custom icons that were made for me by a viewer, very kind viewer, Subhanimus. We have the launchers. Now the eznixadmin tool launcher is in the system menu. One of the eznixadmin choices is to install Firefox latest. So if you do, this icon will then appear in your Internet menu. Live build, I include the live build manual in HTML. Miscellaneous 64 is empty. If you have your own special deb packages you want to include in your build, you can put them in this folder, and then during the running of the script, is something I forgot to mention. If you uncomment this line, it will pull in anything in that miscellaneous 64 folder, any package, and put it in your build. So that would be the way to add, say, I used to add the papyrus icons in this way when I wanted something, papyrus icon package newer than what's included in Buster. I could pull out the SID version, get me newer icons. But I haven't done that. I just stick with whatever's in the repos. But if you have your own created deb packages, you can certainly stick them in this folder and have them included in your build. The MK eznixOS folder is sort of a side project. If you had Debian installed with the XFC desktop and you wanted to just convert it into the look and feel and software selection of eznixOS, you can download these two folders, the script and the folder, and turn your XFC install into eznixOS. I just keep it in there. It's probably not all that useful. The scripts, here is the ezyadmin script. And all of the functions are defined first. We then have our menu and what the menu does, the functions it calls. Very simple script. Also put a disclaimer in, of course. Hopefully it won't cause you any trouble, but if it does, it's not on me. Use at your own risk. But I like this script. It's very easy, very simple to maintain. When I want to add a feature, like I just added install newest kernel from Backports, I just take a stanza basically and put in the steps I want to put in and give it a name. Done. And it's very easy to read. You can see exactly what each step does just by looking at it. The ff install, this is a teeny little subscript linked to ezyadmin. All this does, if you wanted to install the latest Firefox, it checks if there's already a version there and deletes it, and then re-downloads the latest from Mozilla and installs it. Done. Very simple. The sources, I just have a copy of the sources list.list files used for Buster for testing, and then app preferences and config, and the deb multimedia sources. So if you use the ezyadmin script to optimize your sources, this is where it's pulling from. I have a copy of the splash screens. And then the XFC4 folder contains all of the desktop settings to make this distro look like this distro, or this respin look like this respin. Now all of these, the XFC4 folder on your normal system lives under your home directory in .config. So I copy that over and put it into the build. And that, my friends, is the entire structure of the build, the preparation folder. We can see we're already at this point of setting up all of the downloaded and unpacked packages. So we're maybe about halfway through. What I'll do now is just pause the video. We'll come back when this is done. I thought I'd quickly pop in here. We're at the point of the live build where it's creating the squashfs file system. Now, this one step usually takes my system about 6 to 10 minutes, depending on well, how close of attention I'm paying to it. It's a long step. It appears to have stopped, but it really hasn't stopped. If you look at your disk activity light while this is running, it is blinking. So don't worry about it. Just let it go. And it's best not to really watch this process. It's kind of boring. You're just watching a lot of text scroll by. Until this point, and then it just stops. So don't get worried, just let it go. It should finish in time. And we will be back when this is really all done. Okay, folks, we are finished. We got to the end without any errors. Time we finished is 8:30 and 58 seconds in the AM on April 5th, 2020. So that is our timestamp. Now, if we go into our home folder, we can see that the build script created the build folder, eznixOS 103, and inside there are all the files that were used to create the build. The output file is always called live-image-amd64.hybrid.iso. Now, the first thing I've done, and I did this off camera, is I created an MD5 sum of that ISO just to make sure that I had that as a reference. I then copied this file to the name I want, eznixOS 103R2-AMD64. So it's my system, release 2, AMD64 version. And I created the midsum MD5 sum of that. Now, this file and this file, not the Z-Sync, the MD5. There we go. These two should match up perfectly, and they do. So we are done creating the ISO. Now I just have to test this. First test is always going to be in VirtualBox, and the next test will be on hardware. And if it passes both tests, both installations, then I upload it to SourceForge, and it should be there by the time you see this video. So, hope you enjoyed the process, and go to my SourceForge page. It will be linked, of course, in the description, and you can go grab the ISO, and you can grab the build files, because I always put the tar package of the build folder along with the ISO. So you can do that and build it yourself. You can download the ISO, play with it, use it. It's perfectly usable, great Debian system. I use it day to day. Right now I'm playing in Kubuntu, but that won't last too long. I'll be back in Debian pretty soon, because this is just a fantastic, for me, system. If you like it, use it. If you want to play with it and build your own, do it. It's a lot of fun, especially when it works. I will see you in another video, folks. Bye-bye. Oh, you know what? Before I say bye-bye, there's a little bit of cleanup we have to do. Almost forgot. So, now that we're all done building, I copied the files. I actually made a copy of them outside of the build folder, so I have them here. And I am going to clean up this build folder. After every build, I always clean it up. So, we're still logged in as root, which we have to be, but we're in my home directory. I have to cd into eznixOS 103. So let's do that. And give ourselves, you know what, let's clear the screen. Okay. The command to clean up the live build environment is lb clean, and I usually put purge. And this might take a moment, but you'll see, yep, everything is gotten rid of. It does leave the files that I've created, the eznixOS AMD 64 ISO and its MD5. I've created the live build MD5, so it doesn't delete that. And it doesn't delete the config directory, just in case you want to keep using that. I usually don't, because I start over each and every time. So I'll remove that. And just because I know it's there, I'll remove the .build folder. And that's it. Now we're done. Now I can exit out of this. And I still have an extra copy of the ISO. Now we're done. Okay, folks, I will see you in another video. Have fun, take care, bye-bye.